I think staff and the council members have got a copy of the minutes from the last meeting, was April 22nd, 2015. So, Randy, you were here. You'll have to be the one to approve them.
I think Brad Hagan chaired that meeting.
None of the current council members or myself. Larry Hamilton, he's still around these days, but you and Larry are about the only two that are still. And Todd's But I would ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved, Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion. Councilman Williams, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Councilman Hibbs. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, I decided to call this committee meeting, this long-term planning committee together. There's obvious reasons to be having it. With all the growth that's going on in Bardstown, and several of these projects that we'll be discussing today have been kind of on our list of kind of wish lists from some of the department heads for a number of years now as well. But I think it's time for the council members to kind of get up to speed a little bit more on some of these, and then we'll let the staff kind of present some background on some of these projects. And then going forward, hopefully some of the you three that are on the committee, but it's not just restricted to the three council members on the committee. Perhaps some of the other council members might take on as as part of their council duties to sort of work on these projects with some of the staff as we try to work through from discussion to possibly planning to budgeting and prioritizing. So that's sort of my goal as we go through this today. And these are not in any priority what we'll discuss. These are just how they came in from the staff and myself. So as we get into them, I'll ask the particular staff member who might have submitted them to give us some background, and then we'll have some discussion. We won't, I don't think, want to get too far in the weeds about how it would work or how we could finance it, because we're in such early stages on a number of these. But so the first one is one I think that Councilman Buckman and we talked about, and it's something that's been going on for some time, particularly with all the growth downtown, the development downtown with our restaurants and retail stores and so forth, and the Airbnb people who live downtown. It's never probably been more vibrant than it is today with the number of people. So parking is an issue, and I've already done some preliminary work just to kind of get started. I've talked to a couple of gentlemen that I know that are in the public parking business, and just kind of ask them for their advice. One of them, both of them have been to Bardstown a number of times. They know Bardstown well. One gentleman has done some work for Louisville and Western Kentucky and Northern Kentucky University, so the city of Louisville area, so he knows the area. And the other one has been here many times. He's from St. Louis, but he visits Bardstown on a fairly regular basis. And they both suggested that they both know a consultant that does this kind of work, that comes in and can analyze what you have currently, what the parking demands are. They'll do some counts and advise us maybe on how we can create more surface parking, but perhaps even, ultimately we may have to talk about a parking garage. The one area that's been talked about there is the city parking lot on West Flagey as a possible location for a parking garage down the road. The good news about that is it's a perfect size for a parking garage. That's the good news. Bad news is parking garages right now are costing $18,000 per spot.
3 spots, it wouldn't help us much, would it?
Yeah. 80 spots are what we currently have, so if you just say you're going to build a 2-story parking garage, you get up to 240, you do the math, that's about $4.5 million. So that's not my first idea that they gave it. They said after looking at there's a couple things that we've done, we think, is there's some current parking areas that with some maybe a public-private partnership with the city, with some private property owners, could be reconfigured, with the city participation and create more parking that way. There's some areas that are not in use behind some downtown locations. One area that the city has a few spots is on the second block of North 3rd Street behind the Masonic Lodge building, the variety store there. The old people my age know it as the old A&P grocery store building. Well, the city already has a small lot back there with a dumpster that we worked out in public-private partnership with the owners of Masonic Hall years ago. The trouble is nobody ever parks in it except arts and craft and Bourbon Festival and things like that. So the thing I think that we need to possibly do short term is because of the lack of parking, all the people who work downtown, people who live downtown, the owners of the properties and so forth, they have limited space to park. So they're tying up a lot of these parking spots for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And so if we could create some more parking, not in the most desirable areas like outside of our 2 parking lots and street parking. I mean, there's a number of people who tie up street parking day in, day out. But they really don't have a lot of options right now unless they go into the 2 city parking lots. So I'm hopeful that we could possibly talk to some of these property owners, and I've already had some discussion with some of the Masonic Lodge people, and I think they would be open to this discussion. Another area we looked at years ago was behind the clerk's office, the Chapiz house. That property right behind the Chapiz house is a city lot that was created with a public-private partnership years ago. You got the clerk's office, and you got Doug Hubbard's the law office, and you have the Farm Bureau. These are just ideas that we talked about several years ago. We had an engineer reconfigure all that parking, so each one of those having their own. Some are going perpendicular, some are horizontal. Everybody's 2-way in, 2-way out. So reconfigure that whole space back there and have one-way ins and one-way outs. And do a collaborative effort with the city. We could create a lot more spaces, and perhaps a lot of the employees and owners of these downtown businesses could park in some of these periphery areas, and that would free up the street parking and the public parking in our city lots. And the final thing, that these are all discussions I've had with these guys that are more experts than me, so don't give me all any credit for this. This ideas we talked about as we walked around town and drove around town. The other part of this short term, I think, that would help resolve this is if once we could create some of this periphery surface parking, is go back to the 2-hour parking on the streets and in part of our public lots. Again, that would allow those spaces to turn over. And so that more people would be able to stop in front of the retail stores and park in front by the restaurants and have use, because it's really difficult, particularly in our busy seasons, which almost now there's not a slow season hardly anymore for Bardstown. So those are just the ideas that have already kind of come to me. So I think the 2-hour parking one is a viable one. Just so happens we've hired a new code enforcement person from the city of Louisville who's been doing parking downtown in the city of Louisville for some time. So hopefully she will be able to give us some advice. And Chief, you probably know, there's a lot more better devices now that can scan license plates and track them, and you can records available to you so that you know, multi-offenders are right at the tip of your finger, you know, we could review our ordinance, and I think that would be helpful. Again, I'm not going towards paid parking, but just enforce the 2-hour parking. The signs are still there on most of the streets and in the city lot. We just don't enforce it any longer. So that's just a quick overview of what I picked up on today. So I'm open for discussion.
When you think in terms of the reconfiguration, how many additional parking spaces do you think that would create?
Well, behind, and I say this is just discussion, I hadn't even talked with Judge Watts or any of them on it. I think when we did that several years ago, the old Farm Bureau office was still there, so that space wasn't, they created some spots there, but just the spots behind all those buildings, I think we came up with about 12 to 18 more spots, and you had some designated one-way ins and one-way outs, because those entrances off of Third and Second are really, really tight. So you could create some one-way ins and one-way out and reconfigure all that. There's a lot of space back there. And as I walked around with this one gentleman from Louisville behind the Masonic Lodge there, he looked at that and he said, yeah, you could create a lot of parking back here. And, so that's an option.
I do like the idea of the 2-hour parking again, and I do watch the traffic down there a lot. I watch, you can almost pick out who parks in their spots all day long, and I think that would free up a lot. I think probably one of the other things we probably should look into is if we're going to have those lots, we need much better markings for, you know, that there is public parking here and that type of thing too. I think we missed that just a little bit. We did do a few changes to the parking there on West Broadway, West Flagstaff a couple of years ago. It helps, but it's...
Right, and what I'm hoping to do with the committee's approval is perhaps, I've already had a phone meeting with this consultant who would come here and just do at no charge, to meet with us and do a walk around himself. And from there, he can give us more of a detailed plan on, I can do this for you, I can do this for you, this for you. I'm not going to be asking him to design a parking garage right now, but but if he can lay out the most advantageous configuration of some of these available properties, I think that would be a real benefit.
Yeah, to get back to our parking, there are a couple of merchants downtown that when I see them, they always complain that their patrons do not have a spot to park. And part of that during the day is, you know, with the restaurants, more restaurants and more dining and things, there's a lot more people parking there. And they stay, you know, a couple hours sometimes, and it just takes up a lot of space.
Some of the owners and managers, they park on the street while they work all day. Because I guess that's been going on for 40 years, to my knowledge. It's always going to be there, but if you have the 2-hour limits, that will change some of this, I think. So, with your all's permission, I would like to contact this consultant and have him come down, the guy who's worked in Louisville and Northern Kentucky and Western Kentucky. It won't cost us anything to have a visit, and then go from there.
That's great.
I think it's a good idea, Mayor. The fact that you said it's no cost really sold me on the idea.
That's to start with.
I understand.
I've already seen, I've done some Googling. That's how I found out the current, I just Googled build a parking lot, and I ran into this article, it costs $18,000 a spot. So I've been doing some Googling already. So. Anyway. All right, well, if there's nothing else on that one, that's sort of how we'll kind of proceed. Trying to improve our parking downtown. Daniel, you've given us three things you'd like to talk about: the multi-purpose athletic facility, the Spray Splash Park, and possibly another community park on the north end of town. So would you like to speak to these items?
Yeah, the multi-purpose facility, we're running out of gym space with what we have now, and we're very limited as to what we can do with the gym space that we have now. So it logistically and everything, it would be so much easier to have it all under one roof. It opened up a whole lot more possibilities for tournaments and different types of events in the community. You know, it would be more than just basketball courts. Would be what I'm looking at is, you know, a true multi-purpose where we can do not just basketball or volleyball. You know, you could possibly do soccer, indoor soccer, or have other events come in, more community type events, more like a small yum center to a point. And then you have additional indoor walking track upstairs, racquetball courts, like you know, additional locker rooms, and then a fitness training area. That could be a multi-purpose room. Would be nice. I mean, it's probably going to be 40 to 50,000 square feet. Would be my guess. You know, there's a lot of them in town that are in different towns in the state that are complete centers where they have fitness and everything in there. I'm not necessarily trying to compete with the different gyms in town, the fitness gyms. You know, that's one thing that has made theirs sustainable by itself, is the memberships and stuff for their gym fees and things. You know, I think it's needed with the size of the town's getting and, you know, the demand they're wanting. And with the different options you have, bringing up, you know, extra tournaments in, bring different additional revenue in, the tourism aspect, and then being able to do other types of events and not just strictly sports, I think would make a very neat place for the town to focus around. Want to build this also with kind of the focal point. Obviously, in my head, the main area would be this park here is where we would put it. And if we put that there, you know, it would have to be built to where you possibly could attach a pool at a later point in time, or you know, this would be like the center focus park of the town, where we have, you know, the spray park we're going to talk about later will be next to that, and then like I said, possibly the pool, playground equipment. It's going to be an all-in-one, basically city block.
This facility you're talking about have just the one major athletic space in it that you're talking about with multiple?
It'd be, what I'm looking at is basically the size of 3 full-court basketball courts.
You have that in
roughly.
addition to what you currently have?
I'm sorry.
You'd have that in addition to what you currently have?
Yes, more or less. With renovations is what we have to make it sustainable, yes.
And then you're thinking possibly that you would have it designed where you could possibly add, would that be an indoor pool at some point?
The possibility of an indoor pool, yes.
Because I've heard people when this subject came up, talking about, you know, maybe do it in reverse. You know,
Yeah.
You know, like do the indoor pool and then have it designed where you could have this kind of space. So, you know, that's why we're having these discussions.
Yeah, and looking at other facilities like Shelbyville and different centers that are comparable, you know, a lot bigger, but somewhat comparable to what we're talking about, they'll build this first and it'll sustain itself, because the pool can't sustain itself by itself. So they'll build this, and if participation is there, they can go on and add an indoor pool to it. Or, you know, you're putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, I think Shelbyville or DeSales have similar facilities.
Yeah, Shelbyville, Versailles, Georgetown, a lot of the college towns now are getting to that point. Lindsey Wilson just built a new center. They partnered with the town on that. It's a really nice center.
Mayor,
Is there enough space here for that kind of facility to be able to grow here?
Yeah, I think it fit in this whole area. I mean, the baseball field would have to go. It's going to be the concession, but I think it'd be a worthwhile venture. And like I said, if in the future you're looking at adding a pool to it, then this pool would eventually be taken out, and opening up more area for to build a new pool on, or parking, or whatever it may be.
I was gonna say, I've been on the rec department, and, we've had these conversations, and, like you said, there'd be some sacrifices, like the baseball field we have to go, but I think that we really need to really focus on this, because one of the complaints I hear a lot from our youth is there's nothing for them to do. There's plenty for the adults, but there's nothing for our young people, and if we're going to continue to try and keep our younger people here to live here the rest of their lives, then, they have to think in terms of what's going to be here for their children. And that's why, some of them move elsewhere, and then when they get older, they come back when they're 30-ish. So we really need to take a look at this. And to his point about the activities versus a swimming facility is great, but generally speaking, when they build high schools, that's one of the first things that they'll take off, is because the swimming pool will not sustain itself, as he stated there. That it costs a lot of money. It's a good idea, but you get more practical use out of other things like a gym and other things like that. And it would be great if, in thinking in terms of this, if we could come up with some kind of public-private partnership. So that's one of the things that we might need to go in that direction, because maybe there's someone who would like to help us out by donating some money and possibly name the facility after that person or something, or that business.
Mayor, would it be have you ever thought about possibly covering the pool that's there and using that like an indoor to be cost efficient? Is that even something that's possible?
It's been talked about for years and years. It's not feasible.
Not feasible? Okay.
With the age of that pool, I mean, we're band-aiding it together right now
Okay.
just to get through. I mean, I'd say you probably have maybe 10, possibly 15 more years of that pool, and it's going to have to be completely torn out. Renovated.
Okay.
But just the way it's set up, 3 pools individually, you see indoor pools now, they're typically one pool that covers everything from zero depth entry for the kids all the way to a diving area under one pool, where we've got 3 pools up there, and you'd have to cover that entire large space. Once you add in the dehumidification systems and all that for that large of an area, it would be pretty insane, yeah.
So it would be almost a countywide, people from the whole county would use it, not just the city people. Is that correct?
Yeah,
I
I would say. So, I mean, our participation now is countywide, if not further. So, it's not necessarily going to be utilized by the city residents specifically, depending on how you set it up. It's built, if you did a membership fee type setup or something like that, city could have a discount versus county residents would pay more, it's a possibility. There's just different aspects to it, but, I don't necessarily like the idea of charging different rates, but, to even things up, I guess, more or less, that is always an option.
Most of the ones that I've talked to, I've called a few mayors in some of these towns that have them, they are a user fee.
Yes.
So with a monthly membership, sometimes, and I guess if they have a pool, indoor pool, they got that, just like we do, daily passes.
Yeah.
And then they had probably a membership that would include,
And like I said,
use of all facilities or a certain amount of.
when you get into one with fitness equipment and a real truly fitness gym, that's the memberships that are going to carry it. Shelbyville is set up that way. They built a smaller facility to start with, and they've expanded 5 times over the course of the past 15 years because they keep growing, it keeps growing, it keeps paying for itself, they keep growing. You know, and other ones that built, they had the money to build it big, rough, get-go. Georgetown, I think they spent 11 million on theirs. So some of them can be really costly. It's very nice, and I think it's more than we need in this community. But I think we can get something comparable for our size.
I know we're talking about funding, but did Elizabethtown and New Park, did they do like a food tax, a restaurant tax, and then
I think they
sunset
dedicated,
clause on it, I
they
think?
dedicated a portion of their restaurant tax to that athletic fields over there.
The tourism,
Right.
the tourism department actually funded
That's
the outdoor.
Yeah,
baseball and
that's-
soccer fields, and I guess baseball and
That's
soccer
nice.
fields, yeah.
It's a very nice facility, but that's all outdoor, isn't it? Everything is
Yes.
outdoor, I think.
Yeah, there's a private individual building, indoor, I think it's 120,000 square feet building on Peterson Drive down there that's indoor volleyball, basketball. It's bluegrass exhibition or something, I can't remember what it's called.
That's
It's
in
being
Hardin
built right
County?
now. Yeah. Yeah, it's on Peterson Drive down there. It's gonna be indoor soccer and basketball, volleyball, everything under one roof.
And you want to move into your spray splash park discussion?
Yeah, of course, that's a big item that a lot of people are talking about because a lot of people go out of town to use those. Most towns are switching over to spray parks in lieu of pools. You know, E-Town had that discussion when their pool went out. Their pool is about as old as ours was. So they thought that initially, let's go to spray ground because you're looking at 400, 500,000 for a decent sized spray ground, but you don't have to guard it. You know, if you run fresh water, you don't have to use chemicals or anything. So it's, once that initial cost is out there, you got a little cost to take care of and maintain it. But they didn't want to get away from the fact that they couldn't teach kids to swim and things like that. That's why they built a combination of the two. You know, a lot of people with the new park up in Boyd County, Boyd's Fork, a lot of people from here go up there to utilize that spray ground as well. So what I was looking at doing, I've got a couple of layouts for spray grounds of about 400,000 is what a 21 feature spray ground is going to cost, which is pretty nice. And we're looking at trying to actually go with a grant from the Land and Water Conservation Fund, try to fund half of that if possible. So that'd be nice. And I'm talking to our public works director to see what the possibility of some of the work being done in-house to cut some more cost of it. The layout that I got is $200,000 alone in just equipment. So if we can do some of the work on our own, get that in kind to go against the grant, then, you know, it would help us out substantially. So, but it ended up being a 50 by 80 pad, and looking to put it, like I said, up here directly across from the parking lot, with this 16-inch water main that goes across here. That's going to give them sufficient supply of water. And we already have the bathroom facilities here. We'll be able to watch it more closely. We've got cameras coming off of this building, watching the spray ground, and you allow for parking right here to utilize it. So I think it'd be a good layout. Keep kids away from the roads, more so.
So you think if you had that right out here, you would still have room for this other larger facility overlaying like the baseball field area?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this would just tie in, like you have a playground, like I said, it would be a nice city block park complex. You have your playground, you have your spray park, you have your pool, you have your indoor complex. You know, everything kind of ties in together. I mean, I think some things will have to be switched around, changed around to make some more parking, because we can extend our parking this way beside the current rec center gym as well. So there's some options we have to make it work.
So that idea, I guess, if that were to happen, you would still have your other pool open, because it's got, you said, at least 15 more years of life before we have to make a major decision on that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll run this one as long as we can. You know, it's the structural part that's gonna get us in the end with this pool. The actual shell of the pool is what's gonna hurt us. But, you know, right now, we're doing good. I mean, everybody goes, loves it, so it's hanging in there for now, so.
Yeah, because you've got a lot of users of that pool that wouldn't necessarily use the splash park.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. Splash Park's more of a, it's gonna be open a lot more than the pool would be, because it's unguarded, so anybody can walk up basically at any time, but you can set timers on it to only operate during certain hours. You know, you walk up to it, you push an activation button, and everything takes off. Water shoots out of different areas. And it cycles through different sections of the splash park. You know, and it'll cycle on for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long you want it to cycle through. You can set it up with drain the waste, or we talked about even capturing it and put it into some sort of sprinkler system or something of that nature to recycle the water rather than just drain the waste. I don't want to get into a recirculation system where we'd have to worry about chemicals and whatnot. Right now, the state's having discussions between pools and splash parks, trying to lump them all together, and it's turning into a big issue. So I don't want to mess with that as much, because we get a whole lot more restrictions when you start adding chemicals and health inspections and all that start coming. So.
Any other questions on the splash park?
And in our committee, we talked about that too, and that's one of the things what we were referring to, gives children an opportunity to, you know, participate in some things. And so that we talked about that, and that's something I feel like we need as well.
That one at Floyd's Fork down there off 31E, it's well used.
Yeah.
I've been through there twice, and it was just, had birthday parties, family reunions, you know, it's got some picnic area around it as well. It's a good family gathering spot.
Yeah, this one, placing it here, you'd have the dry playground plus your wet playground. And we talked about even putting a pavilion in between where you could access both and have the shelter for the parents while the kids play. You know, traditionally these are fired up in April and then shut down late October, depending on the weather, obviously, when they're winterized. But it's open longer than pool hours, so it gives you more option than just that summer period that the pools are open. So.
Okay. Then the community park north.
Yeah. Population growth on the north side of town. We really need to spread our locations out a little farther. Crossing 245 is a big issue I see. I think if we could get a park on the north side of 245, you know, I haven't really necessarily seen a location, but you know, I'm proposing maybe 3 to 4 acres. You know, with playground equipment, basketball court, pavilion, you know, a small scale, basically, of community park here in town, Halstead, and possibly going in and putting the small spray ground in on that one as well. You know, probably a quarter of the size of this one that we're talking about, but go ahead and doing it right the first time rather than trying to piece it together makes it a lot easier. If we're gonna go ahead and do it, just do it right the first time. But that would serve that large population on the north side of 245. You know, to get kids across 245 135 to come into Marshtown Community Park, because a lot of them cross and come through the trails and come into the park there. And that would have to be driven by their parents, where if it was on the north side, they could connect in there, and cut through the streets, so that'd be my proposal.
Any questions on that? Okay, thank you, Daniel. Chief Kresick, you and I really didn't have any talks here last week about this idea of the need for an expanded or a new police department. We've had some talks in the past with the size of your department now and so forth. So would you like to talk to the issue some with the council that's here today?
I can for sure. There's just some things that we have had to do since we've been there, just by repurposing some of the rooms there. There was an interview room that we repurposed that for the safety of the evidence personnel that works there. We took that interview room and we made that into an office space for the evidence personnel. So their office no longer is actually in the property room where it was before, just for the safety of them, that they're not processing evidence inside of a property room. So their office is now outside of that property room. So they're not sitting there smelling the smells of that. We did install a ventilation system for the betterment of the entire station and the property room. It cuts the smell out and takes the toxins out of the police station. But so we had to take that interview room that was used for fingerprinting and for the officers to be able to, when a citizen comes in to talk to an officer, that is no longer available. So that's one less room that we had. There was also, we had a holding cell that was in the police station that we, just due to limited spacing, we repurposed that and turned that into a small office. So that's used for an office space. We recently purchased a drying cabinet so we can process wet evidence. And just due to the limited space that we have, that is actually put in a supply closet. So just using every little bit of space that we have. Officers are required to have a change of uniforms on site at the police department in case they are contaminated throughout their course of this shift. Right now we have a set of lockers that just kind of sit in the hallway in the back of the police department. So it would be nice to be able to have like a shower facility in case they are contaminated, and then an area to have lockers that are there. But right now we just kind of have that sitting out there. Storage is an issue for us for filing cabinets due to the retention laws. We keep files for felonies for 80 years. So, it's long-time storage that we have to keep these files. Then juvenile records have to be kept separately. Personnel files are kept separately. So that's all those type of things are an issue for storage that's quite cramped. Our property room is limited spacing, and so that's something that we're constantly faced. And then just coming down just space for officers, workspace, just for detectives and personnel. It's just crowded. That I mean, we're making do, and we're doing the best we can, but it is limited in spacing and no room for expansion.
One of the things, again, this is all very preliminary. Some of the discussion we've had is your neighbors out there are also cramped. Dispatch is tight, sheriff's department's tight. So we've had just some preliminary discussions. With a lot of it will be based on possibly some grants. If we could find a space for dispatch to move, then that would open up some space perhaps for Marshtown and the sheriff's department to take over that space, and that might be a short-term improvement. But they've got quite a bit of space, but they're so. In talking to Joe Pruitt and Judge Watts, we said, well, we really need to be looking at some grant opportunities to be able to pull that off, because the dispatch has such expensive equipment to be moved and then put in a new facility with all the computers and telephone equipment they got. It's an expensive thing to do, but we are pursuing that, looking into options at the federal level, perhaps, for some more homeland security money, whatever. So we'll see how that goes. It'd be hard to joint dispatching services around, build a space, buy a space. We think one opportunity might be in the Covet building as we get the new space in the fire department building. There's some space, I think, Greg, we talked about that a little bit, that there might be enough space to move dispatch there. And I don't know, this would be something more for the sheriff and the police department to say, having been that far away from where you all operate on, does that create any logistical issues? But if we're building this new training center in the fire department, that opens up the training center space we have in the Kobeck building. It might be able to house dispatch. That's just some early, very preliminary discussion we've had. You know, I guess ideally having dispatch closer to you would be better than a mile or so away. I don't know.
I mean, I think it would be okay, if, you know, if they're just down the street, it still would be functionable for them to be there too, so I think it's definitely an option.
I mean, you're not right next door to the fire department. You all are able to get your dispatches done okay, so I guess it's as long as it's short. So we are trying to start some, you know, looking into that to maybe free up some space for all three of the departments if we can. So,
Is the Kobeck building, where you're using that, when it's full, is parking an issue down there?
Parking is a huge issue down there. You know, within the next couple of years, we're going to have to do the same thing, have somebody come in and resurface that. You know, we can do the resurface, but then design the parking for it, because since we moved the Bread for Life food pantry down there and then the school right next door, parking is a huge issue.
We do own the property though over the hill down there, or adjacent to that, right next to that?
We do not. The school owns at the back, and we own the property right next to it where the greenway is, but we can't go into that. The property, the parking that we have there is the parking that we have there, unless we get into an agreement with the school, because they own the property right behind it.
so none of that acreage that was acquired with that grant can be used for
Can
parking?
be used for that parking. I've checked into that, and it cannot. You can only put trails and things like that on that greenway space.
Of course, we got a grant paid for most of that, I guess.
Right, it's grant, and we own it in conjunction with the state park, so we can't use it at all for parking. What parking we have there, unless we get, like I said, into an agreement with the school to get some of that space behind where, you know, it's empty right now. What parking space we have is what parking space we have. But it needs to be repaved, it's in bad shape. You know, in the next couple, 2-3 years, it'll have to be resurfaced and then redesigned for parking. I think we can come up with some more parking space, but it'll have to be done.
Well, that's an option directly behind it.
Yes, sir, right behind
The
it.
whole field there, there's actually two, but one's kind of used for recreation purposes, I think. But there's one that could be expanded on for additional parking. The school could possibly use as well as us, maybe.
Right, because the school system, it's a contention now, but the school system, they filter into our parking every now and then, because they fill up so fast too. We paved that area right along that drive, and created 12 to 15 more parking spaces there, and it gets filled up every day. The whole parking lot does, except for Wednesdays, and when Bread for Life is closed. Otherwise, that parking lot is full.
Any other questions, Chief?
No, sir.
All right. Jessica, you've got water and sewer infrastructure and planning. I know you and our engineer were talking about some future stuff just yesterday, I guess it was.
Yes, there's, I guess, two things happening. It's exciting that Bardstown is growing so much, and we're kind of a community that's got business and residents, and folks wanting to be a part of our community and move into our community. We've got a lot of great things going for us. But now we're starting to get into that infill growth, and there's not a lot of other property available that can be easily served with sanitary sewer. And that is usually one of the toughest things to do. Water is under pressure. You can go up and down hills, and that's not really a problem. Still have to build the infrastructure, but it's less difficult to do from a planning standpoint. Whereas you have a treatment facility for your wastewater discharges, and you got to get it there. And the farther away you are, and if you start trying to pump it all over the place, that creates accelerated deterioration to the existing infrastructure that you have in place because of all the gases that it creates. It creates noxious odors. So there's something to be said for smart planning. And then you're looking at, okay, how do we keep that conversation going so that growth happens where it makes the most sense and the most affordable way for us to be able to collect that sewage and treat that waste and keep a good quality of life and a rate that's affordable. So then how do you afford that? What comes first? Trying to make sure that it kind of becomes a circle, because you don't want to build it and then there's nothing there for 30 years. So there's all those kinds of things that we're looking at. Where does it make the most sense to grow, and then how do we fund that infrastructure and make sure that we can maintain and handle that moving forward, especially in the area of constant, we just have to be more environmental conscious, about how we do things and make sure that we keep up with what we have. So that's one thing, growth. The flip side of that from water and sewer is all of our existing infrastructure. We are historic Bardstown. We have a lot of history in our community, in our downtown. There's a lot more people in our downtown. But what does that mean? It means that a lot of our infrastructure downtown is aging. And it's not only is it aging, in some places it's undersized, it's underutilized, because now we are putting, a lot of Airbnbs, maybe it was just storefront warehouse, before, back in the original era of downtown. So trying to look at those changes to what our downtown looks like and what is under the ground, and making sure that we have a plan to keep downtown vital. You have to have those, again, things that are buried underground. They're oftentimes out of sight and out of mind. It's not what you focus on, but in our nation, that's probably one of the largest issues facing most communities all across the country, and that's aging infrastructure. And a lot of the, I guess during the wartime efforts back in World War I and World War II, there were a lot of federal programs that, if you were getting jobs in manufacturing facilities into your community home building, there were a lot of grants to help build that infrastructure. So a lot of our communities, we've been able to keep our rates a lot lower because they were initially, that capital was funded through those grant initiatives. A lot of that stuff it's not there anymore. So we've got infrastructure that's far beyond, 60 years old, 80 years old, and we're needing to come up with a plan. So just a little heads up for the planning group here and council members, that as you see budgeted, capital projects, and it just says downtown infrastructure replacement, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that we can't do it all at once. We're not trying to do it all at once, but we have a plan in place to strategically go in certain sections of town, maybe do it a grid style. We're going to go in, tear the street up once, and replace and plan for water improvements, wastewater improvements, make sure we get fire flows now in those areas. I know the fire department often says, this fire hydrant is broken, we are not getting the flow we need. Well, it's not just the hydrant, it's the infrastructure underneath. You're not going to be able to get those fire flows from a 4-inch cast iron pipe and over galvanized pipes. It's just not going to happen. So just kind of moving in that direction and making sure that the community has those utilities and that level of service that we need moving today and in the coming years, and that we are doing that and have a plan so that it's not, And we have a way to fund that, that we're planning those replacements and kind of building that in for the longevity of our community and our utilities.
And I think to those points, like right now, we're doing work on the Round Creek watershed, and then there's future plans for the Mill Creek area, but all that's on the northeast side of town. And at the same time, there's been a lot of growth straight west that needs attention. And that's, I think, what you all were working on just this week. The 245 corridor that is served for several miles with wastewater now and water, of course. That infrastructure is starting to get full, correct?
Full, and the infrastructure that was in place, like for instance on Withrow Creek, there's a 12-inch line that was installed in order to help serve the Wilson Industrial Park and the corridor out that way. And there's still some areas that haven't really developed along that Withrow Creek trunk line, but it's already becoming undersized. And it's deteriorated rapidly, even though it was installed in the early 90s because of all of the hydrogen sulfide gas that was an unknown consequence to pumping the growth that's so far to the west, 7 miles, out from Corman's Crossing, the hospital, Royal Crest, all of that coming in. And now it's, because that's deteriorating, it's letting in additional inflow. So even though the line itself has some growth capacity left, it's being utilized by groundwater. Now treating, transporting, and groundwater, and I've got a lot of growth happening. And again, just trying to plan how can we get more time, get more capacity out of what we have, and then looking at transportation, where is that transportation on the west happening in the future, and making sure that we are trying to align those projects. And it's hard because we don't have a magic 8 ball, and timelines on when things are going to happen. But my goal has been trying to pick the right place, pick the right time, and pick the right size, which, you may not always get all of those things right, but I'm trying to work towards that and really start doing some more master planning for the overall service area and look at how we do expand those service areas. Especially as you start growing far north. If you think about everything that's currently served, you start going much farther beyond, say, kind of where we're already serving at like Cottage Grove, the Nelson County High School, even like Copper Fields, kind of that really upper end of our service territory. A lot of that's being pumped back into town. So as you grow north, keep in mind you're going to put all of that additional loading into infrastructure that was not designed to handle flow beyond its wayshed. It was only designed to handle what naturally gravity flows there. So then, are you looking at upgrading all of your trunks all over again? What kind of impacts are you affecting to existing long-standing citizens, that have been in a residential neighborhood? I've never had to smell this before. Why is this affecting me? So there's lots of other kind of growth things that happen from a utility standpoint that you don't always think about, but I'm trying to head those off with some of the things we see now, with some of our growth that we had back in the late 90s and early 2000s. How do we plan? How do we still provide that service, but do it in a way that keeps the quality of life good and keeps rates affordable?
And the one thing about all this is that this is sort of, in the utility side of the business, this is constantly ongoing. This time, those of you who've been on the council for a while know that there's been projects almost every budget. Some will get carried over that were related to water and sewer. That's just a constant upgrading the old as well as creating some new infrastructure. But I think where Jessica's coming from is that the growth that we've talked about since we started this meeting has really escalated considerably over the last 10 years. And so since the economy's improved, there's more housing, there's more commercial, road improvements, there's more population to be served. Everybody wants them. We're in the business of it. It's not something you create overnight, so it It does take a lot of planning
It's
and
a lot of time.
it'll take a lot of funding. And you'll have to have rates to support it. So, thank you. Anything else?
I think that's pretty much it. I think everyone was kind of already, we're also working in the very beginning stages of our Public Works building out at the land there adjacent to the existing Kelly Drive shop. So we just had a preliminary meeting with Mr. Keys, Keys Architect, to kind of help us plan that building on there, because again, we've talked about all the growth. We've got a lot of employees, we've got a lot of equipment, a lot of things to serve. Takes a lot of parts and pieces to keep, water meters in stock and, pieces and parts for just running utility companies. So it's kind of Public Works time. They've made do with a lot of things. So we're moving forward with trying to get a facility that meets their needs.
Next question. I think the water, I don't know if it's really infrastructure so much, but I remember 3 or 4 terms ago, the big issue was our water supply. Were we going to have enough water? And now we have, lots of people have yard sprinklers, we have lots of swimming pools. How are we in that respect?
We, in the last year and year and a half, we kind of had it kind of flat. We kind of leveled off. And I think some of the offsets between some of the growth in the community has been offset by a lot of new, I don't know if it's plumbing regulations where you're talking about lower flow, energy efficiencies. So your washing machines are using less water. Your faucets, your shower nozzles, your toilets, everything on your normal household side seems to be utilizing less water, and it seems to be kind of compensating for some of the growth. Long term, within 10 years, are we going to have something decided and determined on what do we do moving forward for raw water? Yes, that hasn't gone away. That's still something that we need to be thinking about as a community and what makes sense for long-term, water needs. But we now have the capacity at our plant to treat 8 million gallons of water a day. And we're, again, hot, dry summer, July this year with the distillery and, growth that we've have. And we are treating close to 5. So, at one point in time, we were at 6, probably in 2013. So I'm not sure if there's, again, some offsets. We've got some districts that have turned to Louisville Water, and so they're meeting more of their minimums, and they're in the peak months, like the summertime, they'll kind of float higher than the minimum. But I think some of that's been offset by our local growth. We've had some loss in wholesale, but it's being made up. So our overall water sales have not gone skyrocket. We're kind of been sustaining, growing some, but to your point, yes, that's another thing that's going to be in that discussion and require a major capital investment, whenever we make that.
And I remember, we had that study a few years ago, which, looked at all our different ways we could maybe get water, and most of those were like a 10-year deal where if you, raise the dam 10 years, or if you go to Taylorville, it was all like a 10-year. If you had to expand this, how long it's going to take to get it done. Is that, so we're not in dire need of water by any means,
but it's
if
definitely something
we had that really
can't
dry
not.
May and June, we could have that problem.
I think what she's referring to is that we've seen, I think, Lebanon Junction uses less water than we used to supply over there, I think.
Right. We kind of made a trade with Lebanon Junction, so there were some customers that we obtained that were Nelson County customers from Lebanon Junction, and then they took some of our customers. So I think that's kind of, some of that is offset too. We ended up having a more compact system. We're having to oversee more, but the overall, it created some loops for us, for serviceability and so forth. But I haven't seen that mass jump over the last, like I said, in fact, we kind of went down.
You know, in North Nelson, I think they're getting more now from Louisville Water Company and maybe
Yes.
not buying as much from us. So that part of the system, you know, the wholesale side has freed up a lot of gallons there.
It has. And some of the other factories that used, for instance, Bird & Son was a factory on Withrow Court that was a really heavy water user. Well, the replacement has been Barton's Distribution Center. They don't use hardly any water. They need fire protection, which gets into another thing we'll probably talk about at some later time, but just the way we structure rates and how we're getting back, you know, those cost allocations requires an enormous amount of capacity volume sitting there ready to use, but it's not something I'm selling every day. So that you have to have a high cost infrastructure, but yet their daily use is supplying maybe, you know, less than 20 people. So there's going to need, we probably need to look at some of those things. We had a rate study, and those were some things that were looked at and brought up that maybe we need to look at to help compensate and have that, not sure if I can think of the right word at the top of my head here, but making sure that the cost of service, the right folks are paying what it costs for that service, you know, that there's value added to that. So,
Any other questions of Jessica? I think I'll skip forward to Nahum. Nahum, you've got some cable and TV and internet.
Right. So, Mary helped us get the study done a couple of months ago, so it's still fresh. Studies for another 5-year planning for our system, for our communication system. And so I'll briefly go through, you know, some of the important things they have highlighted. Some of the details of other cities our size have gone through in terms of transitioning from a coax-based system to a more fiber optics centered network. We've had our coax plant for a while now. We've upgraded a lot of the downtown and some of the county over the last 10 years or so, and we've consistently continued to repair the coax over time. The problem with coax is it expands and contracts over time as the weather changes. That wears, that over time, that creates little holes that start to be used as antennas for impulse noise, all these other RF issues that basically, instead of getting a clear signal from our head end to the homes, now you've got all these other noise components entering the closed system, interfering with the signal. So that affects the quality of service, that affects reliability, and so forth and so forth. And so we have the other limitation, other than the fact it's aging, is with our bandwidth demand from our customers is increasing. As you know, everything is getting connected. Your phones are connected, your iPads are connected. Pretty soon, appliances are going to be connected. And so this connection means more bandwidth. More bandwidth means a need for infrastructure that can support that demand. And so we have seen, and the city has continued to upgrade the system. When I started several years ago and met the needs of the community as has been growing over time, and we continue to do that by upgrading some of the head-end equipment and some of the equipment in the homes to compensate for some of the limitation and bandwidth. So it's kind of like a bucket. You can only fill so much water into it, but you can get creative in how you use that bucket to get more bandwidth. And so we've been doing that over the years to get more life out of the bandwidth. One of them is the digital transition. Analog is not very efficient in how we use the bandwidth. So we transitioned to all digital platform. We've taken our HD platform, that's an MPEG 2, which is a little more bandwidth intensive, to an HD platform that also allows us to, in a sense, put more data with the same space using some sort of codec and algorithm that actually compensate for using less bits in the data. So where we're at and where we're heading is not very different from where we've been. It's the continued growth of the need for bandwidth and connectivity that's reliable, that's not, that doesn't have impact, it's not impacted with RF and all these other environmental conditions. And so that's kind of our need, is to build a fiber to the home network, basically a connection from our head ends to everybody's home. That's a fiber optic that has a better life cycle than the coax, that's new and better and allows us to grow for our needs now and in the future. And so it's not it's a costly upgrade, but it is one we need to stay relevant, to continue to provide and be the engine, the economy engine for the community. As we know, we serve several residential customers and businesses and all these things that rely on the continued reliable connectivity to the internet and to their customers. And so those are some of the projects that Hain TVC has put together for us. We have some projected amounts of what it takes to build a city and what it will take to build a county. And we have a master design coming up that we can share, and along with that is the need for a head end. Our head end is about 600 square foot, very tight in there. We've made all we can do. We've bought taller racks to fit more. We have staggered and put everything in everywhere we can. It's hard, very difficult to move in and out. Kind of big fella in there trying to squeeze between racks. It's pretty difficult.
I don't know how they do it.
So the need for another head end or a second head end is up there, because once we have all these fibers to every home, we'll need a place to terminate them. We'll need additional space to provide the other components that make this whole operation work from our central hub. And lastly, is our need for space at the shop. We're looking to see in this long-term plan if we can build a metal building, basically, similar to what we have. Electric has some needs for expansion as well, and so we can vacate that space for them and build in the new lot that we acquired a metal building to house some of the equipment and parts and pieces that we need in this fiber to the home project.
I think we've got plans to build one kind of storage related facility out there this year, but not anything that won't free up more space for how cable and internet and electric are sharing in one building.
That's correct. So what we plan to, in a new space, build an outdoor open bay kind of storage, but we also have things that have to be under, completely under a cover, and so we'll need some spaces for that as well.
And I think you touched on it, a lot of this change to fiber for homes and commercial that will help us provide, better quality. People still, I think there are times when people experience some slowdown when the school lets out early evening. Sometimes people, the same thing with their TV, sometimes they're seeing some freezing of the TV picture and so forth. So a lot of this will help remedy some of those issues.
That's correct. A lot of those things you're talking about one is congestion. The bandwidth can't provide that adequate demand. The others is just the aging infrastructure that we continue, we spend a lot of time repairing, but you always have an aging system. You all have issues here and there.
Any questions at home on that?
So now, when this building reconfigured, is there enough space here for you guys, what you do here, when you expand? Is that going to hold you so well?
In terms of the head, we're planning, once the fire department vacates to their new building, we plan to renovate that and try to get at least 1,500 to 2,000 square foot of space. That will definitely hold it up. But there will be some expense in moving that and building that data center to house all those connections coming into the city hall.
Any other questions from the home? The last thing I have on the agenda is affordable housing, and this is just something that someone shared with me this past week. Really, it's kind of tied into everything we're talking about tonight. With all the growth going on, employment is at an all-time high. Unemployment's very low, but there is a very strong demand for affordable housing, and it's sort of a two-edged sword. Some of the areas of town are seeing houses getting purchased and repurposed and renovated that are in some areas that have probably had lower rent factors in the past. And that's a good thing to see that Henrytown, Maple Hill, some of those areas now are starting to see people doing a lot more renovating and buying those homes up, and that's great, especially for people who are looking. It might be a starter home for some of those people, and for others, investors. But at the same time, that reduces the number of affordable homes, and so I think, Greg, I think our public housing here on West Broadway is very full, and down on Robin and McGee. There's no plans, really no federal programs out there that we know of right now that would help them build more units in the public housing, which is affordable housing. It doesn't matter, there's an elder population that's in need of this, there's a younger population that's in need of this, and then there's working people that can find jobs here but just can't find affordable housing. So we need to start having some more discussion about what are our alternatives. Is it talking to these companies and owners that are developing these other type of housing, such as the guard homes and some of those, the slate run, some of those are more affordable housing, those type of things. And then there's private ownership that are doing a lot of these type of developments in other cities. But we're just going to have to start, I think, taking some time to look at what options we might have out there to encourage some development of affordable housing. It's a problem that most cities have. We've got a homeless population that we're dealing with because they can't afford housing. Some of them, I think, unfortunately, actually can't afford a house. So I think we need to make that some of a priority going forward as well. So we're going to start making that a priority. I Anybody got any ideas on how to fix that problem real quick?
It's tough, it's hard. You know, land's expensive, you got Jessica's problem, we're growing out, you know, infrastructure's a problem. It's tough, really hard. No answers.
And we'll take away parking spaces, which is the problem we started out with.
Hopefully we can work towards it. I just read an article recently where out in Los Angeles, they literally, the homeless problem was so big that they voted a tax increase to fund like $1.6 billion in affordable housing units in the city of Los Angeles. The problem is, cost of land and construction is so high, those units are $500,000 or more a piece. And they have to rent them at a very subsidized rate. So I don't think they're going to get very much for their $1.6 billion to help fight this affordable housing problem we got.
Mayor, I think in San Francisco, they have people that are actually purchasing mobile homes and trailers, and they're parking them on the street, and they're living in others.
Heard that too.
But it's one of those things you just can't ignore it. It has to start becoming a priority, just like all these other things: water, sewer, cable, internet. All this ties in together. Emergency services, recreation, it's all part of it. So I think from this point, I think we're about finished up here, unless anybody, Chief, you've got anything to add? You sort of got your wish list this year.
Yes, sir.
Well, you might need an engine,
That's true.
or a bumper. That's another thing. It's been on the budget for a couple of years. It's showing like 2 years from now the fire department might have a new pumper, and that's an $800,000 expenditure. They're just going to have to wait for that one.
Hopefully we'll get the grant.
Yeah, hopefully we get a grant for that. So it's expensive running all these services, but it's what people expect. We do a good job at it, and that's why people, I think, are coming to Bardstown to live and expanding their businesses and so forth. So it's a good problem, but it's one they've elected us to do, and you people are working in those departments to provide it. So we'll keep working on that. If there's nothing else, then I would just ask for, one last thing that kind of ties into all this too, is that the comprehensive plan is going to get reviewed and worked on probably after the first of the year. And that again is a part of this whole puzzle, because where you plan to have more growth ties into where you can provide services or where there are current services. You can't just let subdivisions start growing here and there and everywhere, and you don't have the services to support them. So, and commercial growth as well. So that hopefully will be a key thing to help tie in a lot of these questions. And I know we'll have some overlap with that process with our department heads and so forth. And I think Jan said that I think she plans to work on that after the first of the year. So, and that's, again, that's their comp plan has been in need of updating. Again, growth is driving that need. So, but if you don't have planning, then you've got chaos. So it's good that these agencies are doing that. So, all right, then I ask for a motion for adjournment.
So,
And a motion by Councilman Hibbs and second by Councilman Williams. All in favor, say aye. We are adjourned, and we'll have our regular meeting at 6 o'clock.